So welcome back to another episode of Finding Your Way with Lori and Tonya. Listen, if you're a first-time viewer, listener of ours, listen, we are so glad you're here. We're glad you found us, and we wholeheartedly believe that there are no coincidences. You are here for a reason. So there's going to be something in this episode that you need to hear for sure. And if you're a returning listener, we love you. We thank you for being here and for being back. And we hope that you get something out of this conversation today and that you share this. Like, subscribe, and share with people you think could use something like this. As Lori and I always do, we talk about things that guide us to where we are. So that's the whole premise of this, is talking about where we were, our lives prior to that mindset shift, how we put the parts and pieces together, the tools, and then how we got to where we are. And we're not done yet. So we're still learning and growing. And so where we're going to be next is that next step. And so we're continuing to learn. And as we do, we're bringing information to you guys too. So today we're going to talk about inspired action.
Yeah, so I think before, when we were living sort of that everyday, go to bed, wake up, go through the same motions, look forward to going to bed again, and doing that little hamster wheel song and dance we used to do. I guess I didn't understand the concept of taking action versus taking inspired action. Like, it was just, you went through life and you did what your mind told you to do. Like, your mind told you, well, I've learned this, so this is, of course, the next action. And almost like doing it without thinking, but it was coming from a space of your responsibility, the things that you were taught that you should do, and those kind of things. And on our journey, we've learned of this term, inspired action, like taking action only when you're inspired to do so. And that doesn't come from your head necessarily. It comes from your heart and getting really centered on what you feel should be the next step for anything. I was telling Tonya, I had the opportunity to meet a lady who owns a yoga studio just recently, and she was telling the story of how she even came to own a yoga studio. And she said that she had just moved to town. There was no reason that she should be starting a yoga studio. Like, there were so many yoga instructors in the area that she had moved to. She had never had that desire to do that before, but something just kept sort of on her heart. It was like, I need to do this. Like, I need to do this now. Even though there was competition, there was no reason for her to. So she made a decision. Okay, well, all right. Well, I'm gonna go look into seeing how to do this. And all through that journey of going from making the decision to opening the studio, there were little inspired actions she had to take. So the first space she looked at, she thought it was the right space, and it was just like roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And she was like, this doesn't feel right. Like, it doesn't feel right. And so I need to find something else. And then somehow on a detour, her car, the road was blocked and she had to go a different way that day. And when she did, she looked up and saw a rental space and went and looked at it. And she was like, it felt right. Like, I knew immediately this was my space. And so all along that journey, she went from not even knowing that was a desire she had to taking inspired action along the way. And she said that her life has just been blessed in so many ways from actually listening to what deep down in her heart she knew was her path, and following through by taking the little baby step actions that came up with that. So that's really what got us really talking about this today was, how often do we in the past didn't even know what inspired action was, and today actually put into practice inspired action.
Well, and I'll say, I mean, you said it earlier, we were on autopilot for how long? Mm-hmm. We were doing the things we were told to do, we were taught to do, or that we've always done. We made the same decisions. I went to the same place for vacation every year with the same people. We just always did the same things. And, I thought I was doing the right things because everybody else was doing them. And then that's how we were raised, what we were told to do. And I think when you start changing that mindset, what you start doing is you're hearing those God winks and whispers. You're getting those instincts, those gut instincts that because you're doing the work, your mind is a lot quieter and your heart is a lot more open. And so you are starting to feel things you never felt before. And I'll say that, I mean, that's big when you can start hearing those things, but not only when you hear them, is when you start taking those inspired actions. Before it's feelings, it's just action, right? I'm going to get up today. I'm going to put these pants on. I'm going to go to this coffee shop. So even now, something as simple as I just said, coffee shop. So before, the same place every day, right? Now, when I decide I'm going to go have coffee, I kind of get quiet a minute and I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to journal today. I'm going to take my journal with me. What feels right? And there's 2 or 3 places, depending on my mood, what my plan is and how I feel, that I make a decision, a conscious decision, an inspired action decision that is not just autopilot because I always go to the same place, I'm going to the same place. And it's life-changing. When you start, it sounds silly, but when you start feeling those feelings and making decisions based on what feels good and right, and not just what you've always been told, your life starts changing for sure.
Yeah, I love what you said about in the past where, we had pretty much shut down our feelings, right? It was a protective measure. It was just in the flow of doing. Like we were human doings, not human beings, and just do because that was what was expected. And I think in that, as you go through life, sometimes you get hurt, you get disappointed and things like that. And you and I both had sort of shut our feelings off because it was too much, like the feelings was too much. And so we couldn't take inspired action because we couldn't feel. We had shut down our mechanism to feel. And so it was that autopilot, that sleepwalking. And so this concept of taking inspired action, not just taking actions because it's the thing to do, really was a new concept for me. It was like, oh, well, now that I'm doing the work on my mindset and changing and actually experiencing my emotions again and understanding the value that emotions have in my life, I can feel like I know I can sort of use my body and my feelings as a judge of what's right for me and what's not right for me. But I think a lot of times, and I'd say a lot of people in this world are in the space that we used to be in, where you've sort of shut off your emotions and not, because it hurts sometimes to feel, right?
Right.
And so
and it's scary to do something different.
scary.
It's scary to take an action step, an inspired action step that is totally against the grain of what your normal day-to-day is.
Yeah.
I gave the example of the coffee shop, just kind of now, instead of going to the same place I'd always gone, I take a minute and make a decision. But it's big things too. Before we jumped on this podcast, Lori and I were talking about, so I made a career change based on inspired action. And it was, I picked the scarier of the two. Like I had decided that I was working way too many hours. I was underpaid. I was underappreciated. My boys had gotten 4 or 5 years older. I was driving across the state constantly, daily. I was 14, 15, 16 hours. So I made a decision that I had to find a new job. And so when I started interviewing, there were several opportunities. My industry can kind of be tight knit. So when you've got experience, you've got options usually. And so when I decided, okay, what am I going to do? I interviewed for several things, and there was one opportunity that it was good money. It was more than I was making. It was a manager role, all these things. The stars kind of aligned. The money was there. But it didn't feel quite as good. And then the company I'm with now, there was a gamble, it was a risk. They had never had manufacturing engineering recruitment in Columbia, which is what I do. And there was no base salary. And you guys who know my story, I was a sole breadwinner. My husband wasn't working and hadn't for a while. And it's a big deal when you decide, okay, can I go 2 months without a paycheck? Because that could happen. I could go a month at a time without making any money. And so I weighed it. And the logical decision would have been to take the role, right? That the base salary was there. And I just couldn't, there's just something in my heart, my gut that said, you got to do this. Like, we'll figure it out. And so during that time of transition, I actually was able to make some side money, a side hustle, and had enough in a little savings account that if I happened to not have a month of my bills, I would. And again, that was for me taking that inspired action. That was the first part of that snowball that I'm like, where'd that come from? And then the flexibility that my new job had, I wasn't punching somebody's clock 24/7, and my manager was just super accommodating, and she had children, and so that was a huge change. My office building was gorgeous. Like I went from having to wear a suit every day to getting to dress like I would like to dress, and coworkers who were just fantastic. I didn't have to manage anybody. And so that took off the plate. So that freed up a lot of time to be able to spend with my boys. And then, as I progressed, I became successful and more success. And every year it just kept building. And now I completely work from home. If I want to go in an office, I have a desk in a great office I can go into. I'm making more money than I've ever made. I'm happy. I love my job. I really do. But it was an inspired action, acceptance, and not what I should have done. And I think it's because we were doing the work that I was able to get really still and trust trust God and the universe. Like, listen, I'm about to take this leap. Please catch me. But I did. And that leap was that inspired action.
Yeah, because it's scary. It's almost like you just felt called to take that next step, even though you couldn't see the rest of the staircase, right? And so it is scary. And a lot of times we don't take the inspired action because it's too scary. And we don't trust that we've been given that feeling for a reason. The feeling is an indicator of the right step for us. And a lot of times we use that logical mind to talk ourselves out of that. I mean, I'm Capricorn. We're the most logical sign in the whole zodiac. I am like Miss Logic over here. But, it's after you do the mindset work and you get in touch with your emotions and your feelings, and when something feels right, even if you don't know what the outcome of it's going to be, you can trust that the outcome is going to be good for you. And now looking back, you can go, yeah, that was a scary decision, but thank goodness I followed my gut on this, because look at all the benefits. And that's what the universe wants to serve us, is way more than we can imagine, way better than we can imagine. And you would not have even dreamed of what you've been able to get from making those first initial inspired actions. I tell Tonya all the time, the way my husband and I met is a lady that I had known since childhood worked with him. And she was not the get in everybody's business kind of person. She sort of stayed to herself. She wasn't like a matchmaker or anything like that. But for whatever reason, she felt called to introduce us. And I remember her calling me and saying, I never do this, and I'm so sorry if I offend you by doing this, but there's a guy that works with me that I really think you should meet, even if it's just to be friends. And so she kept on him until he connected with me. And now we just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. And if she had not taken that inspired action, by her taking that inspired action, it changed the trajectory of both of our lives, because she felt a calling to do that. And so that's really all we're talking about. It's like the little nudges you get, I guess, like you call them God winks, God whispers, but it's like these little nudges that you get to do something maybe that your logical mind wouldn't tell you to do because it's not your norm, right? So I'm currently got a work project that I feel like every decision I'm making is an inspired action, because I have no idea where it's going. I just have this feeling like it's going to be for the good of all, even though I don't know what that looks like. And for somebody that does use logic, it is a little scary, because it's like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if we do all this work and put all this effort into something and it doesn't turn out to anything? And so I have to sort of weigh those things in my mind but you're feeling called to do the steps you're taking. You got to trust that it's going to be for something, even if it's just to learn a lesson, right? Sometimes that's what we go down a path for, is to learn something. So Yeah, so between the two of us, I'd say you are much better at, you know, taking actions even if you don't know what the outcome will be than I am. But I'm learning, and I'm trying to trust my gut and, you know, how I feel about something. And like you said, it really is, we have to get still enough to be able to tap into that, to know, how do I feel about this? Like, do I have a
Well, and
feeling
that's
one way or
right.
the
And
other? Yeah.
yeah, I think it's trusting yourself that
Mm-hmm.
is that a nudge? Is that a whisper? Is that and trusting yourself, and then trusting when you jump the cliff that you're going to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be little. I don't mean jump like, so
Right.
mine was kind of jumping the cliff. Mine was kind of big, but even the coffee shop, even the, you know, what route you take to work,
Mm-hmm.
you think about that. You know, you take a route and God nudges you, or you get that nudge to not go your normal route today, and then you find out there was an accident. It's just the little things that when you get it, trust yourself, trust God, trust the universe, whatever you call it, but trust it, and take that baby step. And when you start doing this with the little things,
Mm-hmm.
then doing it with the big things is a lot easier too. So think about, get quiet, get your feelings, start feeling some of those, and take some inspired action.